The building has 41 units, 3 stairwells, a freight elevator that I've been nursing along for 6 years on a budget the landlord calls generous, and I call insulting, and one English mastiff named Broad who lives in Unit 12 with a Sorvani couple named Heth and Marin and their daughter, who is 7 years old and calls the dog Mountain, because she came up to his shoulder when she was 3, and the ratio hasn't shifted much since. I mention Broad first because he is relevant to what happened on a Tuesday afternoon in the 4th month after the consortium opened formal settlement access to mixed residential zones. Most of the block had been renting to off-world residents for 2 years before that, quietly. On a series of permits, the landlord's attorney filed under extended commercial boarding. When the consortium formalized it, we got a plaque by the front door and an inspector who spent 40 minutes in the basement asking about load-bearing thresholds. I spent the same 40 minutes explaining that the freight elevator was rated for 1,200 kilograms and that I had, personally, watched a Vrethian scholar and his equipment collection test that rating twice. The inspector left satisfied. I went back to unclogging Unit 7's drain. The 2 who came on Tuesday did not knock at the front door. They came in through the service entrance off the alley, which requires a key I do not give out casually, and they were inside the freight elevator before I had finished my coffee. I know this because the elevator has a weight sensor I installed myself after the Vrethian scholar incident, and my phone told me something in the range of 400 kilograms had just stepped into a car rated for 1,200. I closed the lid on my coffee and went to the elevator, landing on the ground floor and waited. They were tall. The species designation I learned later, kethavari, one of the Reclamation castes, though that word would not have meant anything to me at the time. What I noticed was the clothing, which was expensive and not local, and the fact that they were each carrying a device I did not recognize clipped to their forearms, and neither of them had stopped to check a unit number. They knew where they were going. Broad was already in the hallway. I don't know how he got there. Unit 12 is at the far end of the 3rd floor, and the elevator doesn't make noise when it moves. I did good work on those guides. Heth told me afterward that Broad had simply stood up from where he'd been lying across the kitchen threshold, walked to the front door, and sat down facing it. He hadn't barked, hadn't made any sound at all. Heth had opened the door because Broad's opinion on matters like that had always proven worth consulting, and by then the dog was already in the hall, already moving toward the elevator, at exactly the pace he uses for everything, which is the pace of something that has decided where it is going and sees no reason to rush. He was sitting in the center of the hallway when I came around from the stairwell. The 2 agents stepped off the elevator and registered him in the way that large, expensive people sometimes register things they consider beneath comment. The one closest to me looked at Broad, looked at me, and said something in a Kethavari dialect that my translation unit rendered as "remove the livestock." I said, "He lives here." The agent did not appear to find this relevant. He moved to go around Broad, toward Unit 12's door, and that was when Broad stood up. He did not growl. He did not show his teeth. He stood up from the sit, which took a moment because Broad is large and economy of motion is a value he holds very seriously, and when he was on his feet, he simply turned to face the agent directly, and the hallway, which is not a narrow hallway, became a considerably smaller space. The agent stopped. I've been asked since why he stopped, given that Broad didn't do anything. I've thought about it. My best answer is that there is something about 110 kilograms of animal that has been alive for 8 years doing exactly what it needs to do, without urgency and without noise, that communicates a specific category of information very efficiently. The agent had resources. He had the device on his forearm and the partner behind him, and presumably a plan that had looked reasonable when he made it. Broad had been lying in a kitchen doorway 20 minutes ago, and now he was here, and his eyes were very calm, and the hallway had gotten smaller, and the agent stopped. The second agent did not stop. He came around the other side, which I will acknowledge was a logical choice, given that Broad was oriented toward the first, and he moved fast and with clear intent toward Unit 12's door, and he made it approximately 8 feet before the question was settled. I did not see exactly what happened. What I can tell you is what I heard, which was not much, and what I saw when I looked, which was the second agent in a controlled position against the wall, and Broad already sitting again, facing the first agent, tail moving once slowly, like a second hand on a clock that is not in a hurry. The first agent made one attempt to signal on his forearm device. Broad turned his head and regarded this with the expression he uses when Heth's daughter has decided to explain something to him at length, which is patient and thorough and entirely without concession. I called the number on the consortium liaison card I'd been given at the formal settlement opening and explained the situation in the hallway of my building. The liaison, to her credit, asked only 3 clarifying questions, 2 of which were about the specific unit in question, and 1 of which was about Broad. I told her he was an English mastiff, and she said she was going to need to make a second call before she came over, and I said that was fine, and I pulled up a folding chair from the supply closet and sat at the end of the hall and waited. Broad did not move from his position for the 40 minutes it took the liaison to arrive with 2 officers from the consortium compliance unit. He did not escalate. He did not lie back down. He sat in the hallway with the patient attention of something that has decided this particular piece of hallway belongs to him until further notice, and the first agent, who was still on his feet, did not test that conclusion a second time. The compliance officers reviewed the forearm devices and the Unit 12 residency documentation simultaneously. It took 11 minutes. Heth's documentation was valid, and the agent's authorization was not, and the category of action they had been dispatched to perform was not recognized under consortium settlement protocols. One of the officers explained this. The other filed the incident on a handheld unit. Neither of them looked at Broad directly, which I thought was professionally sensible. Marin came out of Unit 12 while the compliance officers were finishing the paperwork. She had her daughter with her. The daughter walked straight to Broad, climbed partially onto him in the way she has been doing since she was old enough to try it, and said something quietly into the top of his head. Broad's tail moved again, the same single unhurried arc. The agents were escorted out through the service entrance the same way they'd come in. The compliance officers gave me a reference number for the incident file and told me the landlord would receive a formal notification. I said I would make sure he understood it. One of them looked at Broad and then at me and said, in a tone I can only describe as carefully neutral, that they would note the dog's assistance in the file. I said he was just doing what he does. She wrote something down and did not push on the point. Heth made coffee. We sat in Unit 12's kitchen while Marin took the daughter through a reading lesson at the table, and Broad settled back across the kitchen threshold in exactly the position he'd been in before any of this started. He was asleep before the coffee was ready. The landlord received the consortium notification the following morning and called me in a state I would characterize as alarmed. I walked him through the incident. He asked what Broad had actually done, specifically. I told him I had filed my part of the report accurately and that he was welcome to read it. What I wrote in my section was, Resident animal, Unit 12, English Mastiff, 8 years, male, present during incident. Animal did not leave the building. No damage to common areas. Behavior consistent with normal residential presence. That is accurate as far as it goes. I know what the agent said when he stepped off that elevator. I know what he thought when he looked at Broad sitting in that hallway. I have worked in this building for 11 years, and I have seen the way people read a room when they think they already know what's in it. Broad went back to sleep. The question, as it turned out, had been settled before the second agent reached the stairs.